Right. Okay, everyone, we have hit the 1300 hour, also known as 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Good morning to anyone who is out there in the Pacific Islands, and good afternoon to everyone else. Welcome to the first Emergency Operations Center and GovTalks Readiness series in the Pacific Division. We're excited to have you here. We are recording each of these sessions, so they will be able to be shared and referred to later, and you can watch them as many times as you like. Today, your facilitators are myself. I am Sherry Lewis. I am the State Relations Director Volunteer Partner in California, otherwise known as Luke Beckman's Volunteer Partner. And Megan Irk is our Pacific Division External Relations Lead and the beautiful face of our session today. So Megan, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us about you. So
hi everybody. I know a lot of you. Some of you I don't know yet, but I'm excited to meet you and get to know you throughout this series. I am, as Sherry said, the Pacific Division External Relations Lead. I'm also the volunteer partner for Michelle Averill, who's the ED for the Central Coast chapter in California. I'm part of the Northern California coastal region. And when I deploy, I usually deploy in government operations to a state operations center or emergency operations center. And for both Sherry and I think a lot of our passion lies with that government operations work, and are hoping to get everybody else involved and build this cadre up. I did want to briefly say also that Sherry, when you're introducing yourself, I would love just a little mission moment from Kentucky from you as well. Because it is what we do. And I want to thank you all for being part of this process. So Sherry, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Megan. So this session is the first one of a 12-part series. The series in this session will be led by us. We're hoping that we're going to have participation. Well, we're not hoping. We are going to have participation from several other contributors throughout the series. We may even call upon some of you to share some of your experiences and bring some insight to the series. We want this to be as interactive as possible. However, we are working with a large number of people. So we're working through how we might do that best and keep on track with timing and hit all of the targets that we want to. We created this series to offer practical training and insight on how to prepare and work in an EOC, to facilitate effective communication between all of our partners. I recently was deployed in Kentucky, as Megan alluded to, and as I was talking a little bit about before the session started. I worked in the State Emergency Operations Center, and it's a very different experience than what I normally deploy at during wildfire season in our State Operations Center here in California. The two states operate vastly different. I wouldn't say one is better than the other, just very different, primarily in the pace of how things progress. In California, we have a lot of people watching what we do and demanding, I want to say, situational awareness and what's happening in the field in real time. And there's a lot of pressure on that person in the State Operations Center. In Kentucky, it's a very much more managed pace and flow. And part of it, I think, is the different types of disasters that are being responded to. Tornadoes, they happen, you see the damage, and you can tackle that damage and plan around it. Fires, they're constantly moving and the hazards are changing. Though, while we were in Kentucky, we did have tornado warnings. So it's not that the disasters can't expand with tornadoes, just very different. I enjoyed the experience. I encourage all of you to get out of your regions and your divisions and explore these other areas and other disasters and how they compare to what experiences you already have working in your local area. It can only give you more reference of how things work in other places, and it can give you insight on different methods that work in other places that you can bring back to your home region. So that will be my mission moment, Megan, and thank you for asking me to bring it up. One thing I will say is that the tornadoes, because they were so spread out, our disaster area was, I think, 400 miles long, incorporated several states, several emergency operations center, and so there was a lot of interaction and moving parts. This series is intended to prepare you for all of those moving parts. Today, we're going to go over some ground rules. First being, please mute yourself. We have so many people on the call. There's 104 people on right now, and we'll probably have more joining us. So please mute yourself. Do not place your phone on hold, because that will give us a background of music that none of us really want to hear. So I appreciate if you do have to leave the session, leave and rejoin, but do not put your phone on hold, please. Next, please turn your video off for bandwidth preservation. I love seeing everyone, and I wish that I could turn my video on so you could see my beautiful shining face. However, I mentioned I'm up in the Sierra Nevada, and we've had some terrible infrastructure damage with our recent snowstorms and a plane crash in my neighborhood in the summer. And so my bandwidth is awful and I cannot support video. Next, if you're experiencing any technical issues, please use the chat tool so that we can help you out. We want everyone to be able to hear and see what's happening. So please do that. For some reason, if you don't have access to the chat feature, please text me at 530-414-4010 so I can help you offline. And now you all have my phone number as well. So if you ever want to reach out, you have questions about this series, requests, feel free to send me a text or reach out anytime. Megan, I'm going to pass it over to you for the housekeeping, ma'am.
Thank you, Sherry. So a little bit of housekeeping. This session and all sessions will be recorded. We do have a large group. I think we're standing at about 115 right now, and more are expected to join. There were some people that had conflicts today, but will be joining for future sessions and going back and looking at this recording. So we're not going to be able to pause to answer questions during the session itself, but there will be a survey sent out after the session. Please feel free to ask questions in that survey, provide feedback, request development and training support, and we'll respond directly to your requests and compile the questions with answers to share throughout the sessions. Also, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me directly. You have my email, and I can also provide my cell number if you need it, but you definitely have my email. Don't hesitate. That's what I'm here for, is to help people progress through this process. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you need to. So a little bit on introductions. When we thought we were going to have a smaller group, we were going to do it, have you come off mute and turn your camera on and introduce yourselves. But because of time constraints and just the sheer number of people that are responding in on this call, which we're so thankful for, we're going to do it in chat instead. So in the chat, if you could please introduce yourself and share the following. Share your name, your position with the Red Cross, and your region, your most recent external relations assignment, and any and all ER gaps that you hold, if applicable. Or if you're not gapped yet, but are looking to become gapped and need to know what steps you need to take to do that, you can also put that in the chat. And next, I will turn it back over to Sherry.
So why are you here? We've heard feedback from a lot of our external relations workforce that they'd like to better understand the expectations of an emergency operations center assignment. I'm probably going to refer to it as EOC going forward in the presentation, though I'm going to do my best to avoid using acronyms. There will be several acronyms displayed on the slides, and we're going to create a directory of those acronyms for you to reference later and throughout the sessions. The other thing that people have relayed to me is that they'd like to know the specific tasks they're supposed to manage in the EOC and have practical ways of using collaboration and facilitation leadership skills to lead effective communication between partners. They'd like to have tools at the ready to better track and organize the huge influx of information that we get with all of the reports and the meetings we attend, and also to understand how all the external relations activities interact to create a positive impact on the disaster response. So how do all of the activities within external relations work together? What we're going to try and accomplish, our goals. We're going to have an understanding of the following. First, what happens in an emergency operations center? What are the assigned roles in the Emergency Operations Center, and what is the reporting structure? What can we do to prepare before we go into the EOC to have the best experience possible and to show that we're educated and knowledgeable about mass care? We are the experts in the room. We're also going to explore an understanding of the responsibilities that we have while we're assigned into the EOC. And very importantly, how to transfer out of the EOC effectively. How can we set up the person taking over, set them up for success? How can we set the local region and operational area up for success once we move out of the disaster operation? So those are our goals. That's what we're going to be looking at throughout this series. We're going to be taking a deep dive into future sessions looking at the agencies represented in the EOC, what they do and how we interact with them to share and gather information that's useful to the response and the recovery efforts. We're going to explore mission tasking from how they are submitted through the fulfillment and with an emphasis on tracking and methods to expedite those mission requests. We're going to talk about the purpose for all the different meetings we attend and the little golden nuggets of information we should listen for. We'll consider information sharing by looking at what is important to share with our partners and the Red Cross operation. Every external relations assignment is different, but there are a lot of similarities as well. Most of the differences come from the different operational areas and different partners that we're working with. We're going to look at those different assignments and what the responsibilities of those assignments are, how to work collaboratively in the role so that you and your coworkers can be most effective and support the objectives outlined by the operations. We'll look at past practices and experiences that can create different working environments and expectations in different areas. We'll consider whether there have been good relations with Red Cross and the operational area in the past, or if there's some wiggle room for bridge building and fence mending, which I'm sure we've all encountered from time to time. Entering a room confidently gives our partners assurance that you have the facts, knowledge, and awareness necessary to facilitate a discussion required to resolve issues. When you have the knowledge and tools in hand, you can enter an EOC with confidence, knowing you have what you need to support the mission and perform the tasks expected of you. We're going to explore ways to track your contacts, situational awareness, manage it, and manage the actions while providing visibility to leadership and setting the stage for a smooth transition when you're ready to roll off the job. That all leads to an understanding of the reporting structure. Who do you report to? What are you expected to report? How often are you expected to report? What issues should be escalated? When should issues be escalated? And what's the proper method to escalate those issues? Who should you go to first, depending on the scenario and depending on the urgency of the situation? Like we think about closing a shelter as soon as we open it, you're going to hear me talk about this theme over and over. We need to consider how we're going to leave the state of our efforts when we transition out of the role. We might be passing everything on to someone who's taking over the job, or we may be passing all the tools and information on to the home region where the disaster occurred. As long-term recovery begins and the DRO transitions back to the local region for management, we need to set them up for success with their government and non-government partners for future collaboration. We get to go home. They don't. They work with those partners over and over and over. So we need to make sure we do what we can to nurture that relationship and make it better. The tools created and used during the operation, like contact and task lists, can be used by that region when they take over. So we should be using them and maintaining them in a way that they can be picked up, passed on, interpreted, and used without explanation. When we go, they're not going to necessarily be able to call us 5 months down the road and say, hey, what was this contact about on here? So we want to make sure that we leave them with as much information and background as possible. So Megan, I'm going to pass it over to you so you can tell the group a little bit about how this series is organized.
Great, thank you, Sherry. So how are we organizing this series specifically? The series itself is organized around the 4 activities of external relations and how these activities support clients in a disaster event. And the details and roles and responsibilities within these 4 activities. Most of you know the activities already and are involved in them, but we'll review them just to make sure. For the 4 activities that are involved within external relations are government operations, community engagement and partnerships, also referred to as CEP. Again, there are a lot of acronyms with Red Cross, and we're going to try to stay as acronym free as we can. If we slip back into acronyms, please call us out on it and let us know. The third and very important one is public affairs, how we tell our Red Cross story and how we tell the story of what our clients are going through. And then finally, fundraising. Obviously, without fundraising, we cannot do the job we do around the country and provide service for those in need. So included in this series, we're going to have segments on instruction for specific roles and activities within an EOC, what you need to know going in, what you need to know while you're there, and what you need to know transferring off to either back to the region or to the next person that's rolling onto the job. Also included are the explanations and a deeper dive into all 4 activities within external relations. We're going to be role playing a lot. And we're also going to be having an exercise, which I don't know how many of you have done formal exercises before, but I've found them to be exceedingly helpful with learning those hard and soft skills that you're going to need in an emergency operations center or state operations center. We're also going to be telling you how to find and collect and disseminate resources, things like tools, forms, task lists, and how to put those things in an organized way that can be utilized by other members of the team. Moving on to the series schedule, and I will send that back to Sherry.
All right. Thanks, Megan. So for the series schedule, we're going to meet every Tuesday between 1300 and 1400, also known as 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we chose this time specifically because this is a division series, and we want everyone in the Pacific to be able to join, and we want everybody on the West Coast to join. And this worked out beautifully so that the folks in the Pacific can join during the morning hours. So welcome, everyone. I'm glad to see that we have several on board. So today is our first session, and it's the series introduction. We're also going to be going into preparation. What to know before you go to the EOC, what to have in hand. Next week, Luke Beckman is going to be facilitating the discussion, and he's going to paint a perfect picture of disaster response and recovery for us. It's going to give us our goal. This is what we're going for. Now, we know that it's never perfect. Response and recovery, disaster is never perfect, but that's what we strive for. So he's going to paint that picture for us. I should say we're going to paint it together. Part 3, we're going to be talking about what we actually do when we get to the EOC and the tools that we use to be successful. Moving into February, part 4, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of networking. Upon arrival at the EOC, who do we meet? Who do we connect with? And who are in the field that we need to connect with? Who are our partners that are going to be working in the field from the other external relations work or activities? Part 5, we're going to be getting into meetings. We all attend more meetings than we want to. But what do we get out of them? What should we be getting out of the meetings we attend at the EOCs or with other partners in the operational area? What nuggets of information can we pull out of the clutter of conversation that is actionable and should be shared? From there, we're going to move into looking at situational awareness in the EOC. What should we track? Why should we track it? And who do we share the information we're tracking with? In part 7, we'll be moving into the second half of the series and looking at what operational situational awareness we should be sharing with our government and non-government partners. What is useful for them to know? What can we share about our operation to give them a better understanding of our efforts in the field? Starting on March 1st, we'll be looking at identifying, vetting, and actioning to fill unmet needs and how we can facilitate conversations to meet those needs efficiently through collaboration with our government and non-government partners. With part 9, we move into the facilitation phase of our series. It is satisfying for me to facilitate conversations where solutions are created collaboratively and with our community partners. I think this is my favorite part of government operations and community engagement with partners, because we get to bring people together to find solutions to problems. A lot of times in government operations, we don't have the ability to make decisions, but we do have the ability to share the information that others need to make those decisions. And how we present it and when we present it is vital. Next, in session 10, we'll be looking at how to facilitate conversations between our community and government partners by considering who the stakeholders are, what objectives they're trying to accomplish, and the roles of each agency in the conversation. Part 11 will be an in-depth look at how we want to leave our assignment, the tools we'll pass along, the information we'll convey, and pending items that require action so that operations won't be negatively impacted by our transition. We'll be bringing the skills we learned and using the tools we acquired to an exercise that Megan talked about a little bit in our final session on March 29th. That'll wrap up the series, and it's an opportunity for us to bring all of these things that we've studied and practiced into fruition. So I'm passing it back over to Megan now to talk about our learning objectives for what we want to know before we go to our assignments.
Thank you, Sherry. So one of the most nerve-wracking things for a lot of responders is to figure out what you really do need to know before you go. What's going to set you up for success once you get to the job site. So first, we're going to define the 4 external relations activities and describe the roles and responsibilities of workers in supporting these activities. Then we're going to prepare and plan to use the skills and abilities required to thrive in an emergency operations center and during government discussions with partners. And then demonstrate what you need to know before you go. So the 4 activities of external relations I mentioned briefly before. First, government operations. It's kind of self-explanatory, working with governmental partners and during an operation, during a disaster, to partner with them to get services to our clients and to people that were impacted by the incident. Secondly, community engagement and partnerships. And that's again, partnering with community organizations and individuals, and how important that local knowledge is to the response and recovery from a disaster. And so leveraging those partnerships and those relationships in order to get the job done. Then public affairs. Again, how do we tell the Red Cross story? How do we get the information out to the public that the public needs to know to be able to aid us through donation or through other ways also. And then fundraising. Fundraising obviously is crucial. We can't do what we do without fundraising. It's a crucial part of what we do. So what is government operations? Government operations is the activity of government operations is intended to facilitate collaboration between the Red Cross disaster operation and the governmental agencies responding to the incident. And that is everybody from the governor to the sheriff to all the fire agency, every agency that you deal with in an EOC. So an example that we put up was an external relations government operations service associate, which is that gap that's ERGO SA. And they're assigned to an EOC as an EOC liaison. They're reporting to the government emergency operations center, and they're going to need to know what their responsibilities, roles, and tasks are in order to provide successful information to whoever they need to provide it for, and to answer questions coming in from the governmental organizations that they're dealing with. The activity of community engagement and partnerships is intended to facilitate collaboration between the Red Cross disaster operation and the non-governmental agencies responding to the incident. So all the community groups, faith-based organizations, all those partners that are out working in the community day in, day out. Those partnerships are crucial to getting services done. An example of this would be an external relations, community engagement and partnerships service or supervisor, in that assignment ERCEPSV. And their assignment would be to do something like roaming the county impacted by the disaster to collaborate with community partners on response and recovery efforts, and engaging those partners, engaging and facilitating conversations with the Emergency Operations Center, with all the community organizations and the volunteer organizations, COADs and VOADs, and other partnering agencies, the RC Government Ops Liaison, the Red Cross elected official liaisons, the Red Cross itinerating deputy directors, and Red Cross executives and or community volunteer leadership. And then public affairs. The activity of public affairs is intended to communicate and share the Red Cross disaster operation response with the public, Red Cross external relations team, and agencies responding to the incident. We need to get our story out. And a great example of this is an external relations public affairs service associate would be roaming the operational area, or OA, impacted by the disaster to gather Red Cross stories and mission moments, engaging in facilitating interviews with partners, the Red Cross workforce, elected officials, and community members, and sharing the stories with other external relations activities to pass on to our partners and the public. And then last but certainly not least is fundraising. The activity of fundraising is intended to share the story of the Red Cross disaster response and report unmet needs so that potential donors can fulfill those requests to better facilitate an incident response. An example of this would be external relations fundraising manager. They would consider the level of the incident, and then once they've determined the level of the incident, they set fundraising targets and establish fundraising goals. Also, they would determine the size of the team needed to meet those set goals, and recruit, strategize, and plan on how to best utilize the team to meet the fundraising goals.
So before we move on, oh, thanks, Megan. Sorry about that. I cut you off a bit. So before we move on to skills and abilities that will allow you to thrive in an EOC, I'm going to call out on Betsy Whithone and just see if she'll share a little bit of her most recent experience in Kentucky as an IDAD, which is an itinerating Deputy Assistant Director. And I had not had the experience of working with an IDAD in California, but did in both my two most recent deployments in Washington and in Kentucky. So Betsy, do you mind on me calling you out to share a little bit about your experience as an IDAD and what you do?
Well, actually, I wasn't an IDAD. I was the Deputy Assistant Director of a brand new kind of activity called the Mobile Community Outreach Team.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, please share about that, because that is new and exciting for all of us as well.
Yeah, and the concept is that in Kentucky, the folks that were impacted by the tornado were not coming out of their homes. There were people that were trapped. They were the elderly, the infirm, and they were just not coming to our emergency aid stations. So the concept of a mobile community outreach team was created, and it's my job to put it together. And we were informed about where to go by our elected official liaisons. And they would be talking to the electeds, who would tell us that in my community, these are the neighborhoods we need to go visit. We would talk with our community engagement partners, who would be talking to the community organizations in the counties about where we might be able to set up sites where we could meet with folks that were impacted, like this might be the Catholic Church that served the undocumented folks that didn't want to come to our recovery centers, or the African American Church that, while that African American community might come out, they would be better served if we were right there working with the NAACP at that church. So it was a new concept, and the partnership with our government partners, our GovOps folks and the CEP, was absolutely vital. And we ended up opening over 200 cases and really getting out there in the community and giving service to folks that we would not have been able to serve otherwise.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I think I'm so sorry. Is Deborah Smith on the line too? She was an IDAD. And so I'd love to hear about that position if she's on the call with us. I'm not hearing her. Okay, well, we're going to move on to our skills and abilities. Betsy, thank you so much for sharing about the MCOT, is the acronym for the Mobile Community Outreach Teams. And I loved seeing the collaboration between all the activities within external relations and how that all played into the efforts you guys were able to bring out to the field. So outstanding job and great work thinking innovatively and creating a solution for a disaster response that is fitting for the folks that are impacted. So thank you very much, Betsy. And what a more fitting disaster, because of how that it was so spread out over such a distance. And I can see how there was probably many communities of people who that benefited, so they didn't have to make the journey out, especially in some of the crazy weather we were experiencing there in Kentucky. So some of the skills and abilities that are needed to thrive in an EOC and to facilitate those discussions with partners, we're going to look at them and discuss how what you should practice and hone to be better at your job. We're going to consider a list of abilities and skills, and we're going to define them, and the skills the external workforce should hone to thrive in an EOC and facilitate impactful discussions. We're going to look at the list of abilities one should have in order to facilitate productive and effective discussions with partners. So what are those skills and abilities? First, gathering situational awareness. We know that's vital. We don't have anything without situational awareness and the skills necessary to determine what is important to share in action. Next is the ability to prepare and the skills to utilize the preparation effectively. Successfully communicating means you have the skills to listen and identify what drives the stakeholders in the conversation. The ability to analyze information and the skill to know where the information should be shared for action is essential for the next step of strategic planning. You must have the ability to strategize in order for skillful use of the information to occur. Finally, the ability to assertively influence others when actions should be taken, and successfully exercise persuasive skills to motivate the decision maker to take action. So what is gathering situational awareness? For me, it's the ability to read the room by considering the following. Who is present and whose interests do they represent? What motivates the people in the room that are participating in the discussion? Where do all of those people fit into the overall dynamic of the people in the room? And what is the urgency of the topic being discussed? What is the urgency for the people in the room of the topic being discussed? And how can collaboration be facilitated to encourage forward momentum and meet the needs of those impacted by the incident? So when gathering situational awareness, it's about asking a lot of questions. And it may not be asking questions out loud. It may be acknowledging those questions and answering them yourself so that you can get a picture of who you're working with and how best to work with them. So the ability to prepare. What can be done to prepare for the assignment? We're going to talk more about this. Megan's going to go into greater detail about it, but here's some of the things that I consider when I'm trying to prepare for my assignments. First of all, who are the point of contacts that I need on my list? Who should be added to my list of point of contacts that are not already on it? What reports are already available to review? If we're in the middle of an incident, we're going to have IAPs, we're going to have sit reps, we're going to have incident reports, and various other reports out there at our fingertips. If it's at the very beginning of a disaster response, we might only have the incident report and some social media. What tools are available and ready to use? Where are agencies collaborating and planning response efforts? So obviously we know about the EOCs, we know when they open up. We may know about some FEMA efforts or some other government agency efforts. What we really need to get a handle on, and this is where our community engagement and partnership folks really come into play, is where are the community people meeting and collaborating and planning their response efforts, because they're really the first ones on the ground and we need to catch up with them. and see how we can support their efforts, how we can collaborate with them, and how we can support them. And then when is updated information expected? When can we expect that next report, that next sit rep to come out? Most important is the ability to communicate effectively and how to practice and facilitate better communication with our partners. Again, I start with a list of questions that I need to consider. Who are the stakeholders of the topic being discussed? What motivates those stakeholders? Where is the best location or setting for the discussion? And when should the discussion occur? All of these things play into how effectively communication occurs between people. So think about all those factors. The ability to analyze information. How do we analyze all the input we receive to identify actionable items? How do we review those IAPs, sit reps, and other reports? What information is being shared at meetings that's applicable to this response? Who are the agencies and the partners sharing reports with information that should be considered? Where are other sources of information to consider? And when is each source of information updated? Again, everything is repeated over and over again, and we need to make sure we're staying on top of the most current information. So again, pay attention to those incident periods. And then again, the ability to strategize. How do we strategize with partners to address those unmet needs through collaboration? What unmet needs and actionable items have been identified through the review of the reports and data analysis? Who are the agencies and the partners that we're going to be collaborating with? Where are the resources Red Cross and other partners have that are needed to satisfy those unmet needs? And when are those resources available to satisfy those unmet needs? All of those tools, all of that information we can use to strategize. And again, we're not usually making decisions in our role in government ops, but our ability to strategize and present that information in a persuasive way gives our leadership or other partners the ability to utilize that information and make decisions based on it. And we can and should influence those if we have the expertise to do so. And this is where it comes to the ability to assertively influence. And you're going to see a lot of these questions and considerations are the same as on the previous slide, because the considerations are the same. What are the unmet needs that need to be satisfied and can be satisfied through the collaborative discussion? Who are the partners making those decisions that we can influence based on the information that we're sharing and have? Not our opinions, but the facts. And then again, taking into consideration where the partners are and where the resources are to meet those needs effectively and in a timely manner. So who is the best person to influence to make those decisions? Who needs that information the most to make those decisions effectively? And now Megan's going to cover more about what to do before you go to the EOC.
Thank you, Sherry. So preeminently, you want to gather situational awareness. You want to know when you get onto the scene as much as you can about the incident. So gathering situational awareness any way you can is going to be crucial. Start utilizing the tools that are already there, either in Teams or through the Exchange or through other manuals or tools that you have used in the past that have worked for you. Immediately start to identify your initial points of contact. Cannot get across enough how important those points of contact are going to be in the beginning and throughout your entire deployment and throughout the entire response and recovery. So getting the right points of contact, making sure that you have all the correct details down to be able to get in touch with the people that you need to. And then identifying and connecting with the entire external relations teams, managers of all the ER activities, supervisors, service associates, elected official liaisons, IDADs, and others operating in the same operational area. Again, it goes back to communication. You really want to get that communication and collaboration going from the start so that the operation itself will run more smoothly in the long term. And then you want to also identify your local leadership, because that's where you're going to get a lot of the most important contacts and also the important situational awareness about that local area. So you want to identify the RDO, the regional director. You want to also identify the DPM, make sure that you have all that information going in. And then slide 39.
This is the next slide, Megan.
I'm seeing 38. Okay. You want to also review all available incident reports, incident action plans, situation reports, government media releases, evacuation maps, disaster assessment reports, as well as keep an eye on social media. Social media is kind of a two-edged sword these days. There is a lot of good information that will give you situational awareness coming out of them, especially the official sites like the county public information officer or state public information officer. Also, some community groups do put out some good information, but you just really have to take some of the social media part with a grain of salt and make sure that you're double and triple checking anything you're getting off of social media to make sure it's correct and factual and not just somebody's opinion or completely incorrect. Then you want to identify unmet operational needs. Again, monitoring social media for complaints about response and recovery efforts. If you see those, you want to ground any rumors you see or get help to ground any rumors you see with public affairs. You want to determine the relationship status between the operational area and the Red Cross before the incident. How good is that relationship? Were there past challenges or preconceived notions to be mindful of? Do we need to mend fences and build bridges again, or are we good to go on day one? And then are there best practices established for the Emergency Operations Center and the Red Cross? Again, leaning on our local subject matter experts to get that information. And then being able to identify and use the tools. So there's many, many tools that Red Cross provides us to do our jobs. And you want to go in and explore the external relation folders and files, either in Teams or in the Exchange. Identify existing tools in use by external relations. Ask the AD of ER. They're the best person to ask. They will have that information or they will find it for you. And then logging situational awareness. The last few years, we've been using Teams, at least the last 2 seasons, we've been using Teams. And part of most of our teams are using these daily activities logs, which can prove to be of extreme help to yourself as well as anybody working on your team. So it's just a overall activities log of what's going on through the day, including managing your points of contact, important things that other people need to know or that you need to remember. You can also go back in time and look, if you're looking for something you know happened that was important, but you don't have it down in your notes, you know the log is there in the Teams file, and you can refer to that when you need to get that information. And then starting and using a point of contact workbook. also to be kept. You can keep it in the Teams file so that everybody can view it. You can also have a copy of it for yourself. Make sure to update it though, because people do roll in and out of positions, not just with Red Cross, but at the county and state level. So you want to update it as you go. And then your Red Cross points of contact, make sure you know who those are. The ADVR, the activity manager for external relations, the state and local emergency operations center representatives and liaisons, the RDO of the operational area, the DPM of the operational area, the CEP lead, and I said I wasn't going to use acronyms and I just used 3. So the CEP lead is the Community Engagement and Partnership lead. Obviously the job director, the director of operations, the community volunteer leadership, as well as the elected official liaisons and IDADs working in the operational area are also going to be people that you're going to want in your points of contact to be able to reach out to when you need information or when you need to impart information to them. And partner points of contact. You also want to have a list of points of contact for your governmental partners, all the contacts at the Emergency Operations Center or the State Operations Center contacts, your contacts for community organizations active in disaster, as well as volunteer organizations active in disaster. You'll find COADs and VOADs at the local and state levels are more or less robust depending on what part of the country you're in. They are gaining traction across the country and they are very valuable and are important partners for us. And then non-governmental community partners. Community partners are active in responses, and often they are some of the first people that are active in that response. So faith-based groups, civil groups, local businesses, even local sports teams, all different types of partners kind of come out of the woodwork, thankfully, when there is an incident to respond to, and they can prove to be very important partners to us in getting the job done. And then connecting with the ER team. Again, going back to communication, collaboration, and coordination. Number 1, communication. Just remember that more communication is better. So you want to ask the status of the team. Identify who else is active on that external relations team. Determining responsibilities of each one of the team members is important. People need to know what their jobs are and how to do them. Determine the tools utilized and make sure that everybody's on the same page with how to get to them, that they can find them, that they can utilize them, and that they have access to them. You want to gather details regarding important meetings that should be, and who should be attending those meetings. Collect contact information for all the points of contact in the operational area, and then probably break them down by groups so they're easily found when you need them, because as we all know, a disaster sometimes moves at lightning speed, and when you need to get in touch with somebody, you need to get in touch with them quickly sometimes. And then the overall sense of external relations on the operation. Are there communication struggles? We've all been on, I don't think I've ever been on a disaster response where there were not communication issues. So filling in those communication gaps and making sure that moving forward, you have open, free communication and fulsome communication to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Are there any unmet needs to fulfill? If there are, what are they, and can we fulfill them? Or if we can't, can we find somebody that can fulfill those unmet needs? And then are there operational roadblocks to manage that are manageable? Or do we need to escalate? And knowing when to escalate. And turning back over to Sherry to wrap us up in the last couple slides.
Excellent. So yeah, we're down to our last 6 minutes and we're going to cruise right through it. So another vital step that we've touched upon is in preparation for your assignment is to identify and reach out to the local leadership to gather their knowledge and their local insights. Understand what the planning efforts were before the disaster, the status of relationships with community partners, and to shed light on previous challenges working within the operational area. We can ask them for advice on communications strategies that have worked in the past and things to avoid where conflict has occurred. Ask for knowledge about local customs and things that are good to know in the area to avoid offending locals. And that, oh goodness. I apologize. I lost my screen for a moment, everyone. So again, really important before you get to your assignment to get prepared. Do your homework. There's a lot of things that you can do in the couple of days between when you're assigned and when you get on the job. You usually have a plane ride where you can take that time to study up on whatever reports are available and to get a leg up on all of these other things we've referenced. Most of these things can be handled through emails. And I know that the local leadership will appreciate hearing from you and you asking for their insight before you try and act on their behalf in the local area. So very important. So to wrap up session 1, we're going to recap what we covered. Our series objectives and the schedule. We looked at abilities and skills to practice and hone. We reviewed assignment preparation and what is helpful to know before you go. We covered a lot, and we have plans to cover a lot more in these upcoming sessions that we described. I know we used a lot of acronyms today, and we will be creating an acronym directory that I mentioned because we're only going to continue to use more acronyms. And I wish I could do my best to avoid them, but because these sessions are as short as they are, and because acronyms are a part of the real world in our response efforts, we need to get used to them. So we're going to cover those acronyms, but we're also going to have the directory available. We'll throw in chat what the definitions are throughout the series, and always please ask in chat if you're unfamiliar with an acronym or what it means. So as we mentioned, we're going to be sending out a copy of this video of this session today. We're also going to be including a session survey. In that survey, it's going to have a little bit of a knowledge check, similar to the knowledge checks that you see in EDGE. There is going to be requests or an opportunity for you to request information and ask questions. There's going to be an opportunity for you to provide feedback. And then we're also going to share a disaster scenario with you, just the initial incident report. And this scenario we're going to be using throughout the course of this series to build upon, and it will be the scenario we use for our exercise. So please read through it carefully, respond to the survey because it's going to give you insight into next week's session and give you a leg up in preparation for that session. And it's also going to give you an opportunity to view that disaster scenario that we're going to be utilizing throughout this series for our exercise. So with that, I'm going to leave you early with a little 2 minutes left to add to your day and your free time. And I want to thank you all so much for attending. We had an incredible turnout, and I appreciate the time that you're all dedicating to make yourselves more effective and better communicators and facilitators in our EOCs, in the field on our operations, so that we can bring this all together and make the operation better for everyone, especially the clients we're serving. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you, Megan, for rocking it, lady. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Sherry. And thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week. And again, don't hesitate to email me if you have any questions. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, all.